It doesn't look like a big deal. You don't reply for a few hours, then a day, then suddenly it's been 3 or 4 days, and now it feels even harder to come back. So you stay quiet a little longer, not because you don't care, not because you're trying to ignore anyone, but because something in you just shuts down. And if you've ever done this, you've probably asked yourself the same question. Why do I do that? People who disappear like this are often misunderstood. From the outside, it looks like distance, avoidance, maybe even indifference. But internally, it feels very different. It feels like noise. Too many conversations, too many expectations, too many small emotional demands stacking up all at once. Messages you haven't replied to, conversations you don't have the energy to continue. People who expect a version of you that you can't access in that moment. So instead of responding halfway, you disappear completely. Not as a decision, but as a reaction. And it usually starts in very small ways. You read a message and don't feel ready to respond. So you tell yourself you'll answer later. But later comes with more pressure. Now it's not just a reply, it's a delayed reply. And that delay starts to carry weight. You begin thinking about how it looks. What do I even say now? Is it too late to respond normally? Do I need to explain why I disappeared? So instead of opening the conversation again, you avoid it. Not because you don't want connection, but because the emotional cost of re-entering feels heavier than staying silent. And this isn't just about messages. It shows up in plans, in calls you don't return, in people you genuinely like but slowly drift away from. Not intentionally, but quietly, because something in you needs space but doesn't know how to ask for it. And over time, this creates a pattern. You become someone who disappears, someone who comes close, then pulls away, someone who connects, but in controlled amounts. And the people around you might not understand it, but to you, it feels necessary. Because staying present all the time feels overwhelming in a way you can't always explain. And here's where it gets interesting. This behavior isn't really about people, it's about regulation. It's about what happens internally when things feel like too much. Because for some people, emotional overload doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't look like breakdowns or visible stress. It looks like silence, withdrawal, disappearing. You might be the type of person who absorbs everything. You notice tone changes. You overthink small details in conversations. You replay what you said and what they meant and what you should have said instead. Even simple interactions don't stay simple. They linger, they expand, they stack, and eventually your mind reaches a limit, not loudly, but quietly. And when that happens, disappearing becomes a way to reset, to clear the internal noise, to exist without expectation for a while. But there's another layer most people don't see. For many, this pattern didn't start randomly. It was learned. At some point, being fully present, being fully available, felt like too much. Maybe you had to manage other people's emotions. Maybe you felt responsible for how others felt around you. Maybe you learned that responding, engaging, explaining always came with pressure. So your mind found a solution: reduce exposure, limit access, step away before it becomes overwhelming. And over time, that turns into a kind of emotional instinct. You don't think, I need to disappear. You just feel it. That quiet pull to step back, to not reply, to not engage, to be alone until things feel manageable again. And it's important to understand something here. This isn't laziness. It's not a lack of discipline. And it's not that you don't value people. It's that your system is trying to protect itself from overload. From too much input, too many expectations, too much internal processing happening all at once. But the complexity comes from what happens after, because disappearing might create relief in the moment, but it also creates distance, unanswered messages, unfinished conversations, people who don't understand what happened. And now there's something new added to the weight: guilt. So the next time you think about replying, it's not just a message anymore. It's everything attached to it. The delay, the explanation, the fear of being misunderstood. And that makes it even harder to come back. So the silence continues. And this is where the pattern becomes self-reinforcing. Overwhelm leads to withdrawal. Withdrawal leads to distance. Distance creates pressure, and pressure leads to more withdrawal. But at its core, this behavior is deeply human. It's what happens when someone feels more than they can process and doesn't have a clean way to regulate it in real time. So they step out of everything, not to disconnect, but to stabilize. And if this is something you've recognized in yourself, it probably means you're not someone who takes connection lightly. You feel it, you process it, you carry it longer than most people realize, which is exactly why, sometimes, you need to step away from it. Because for you, presence isn't passive, it's active. It requires energy, awareness, emotional bandwidth, and when that runs low, disappearing becomes the only way your mind knows how to recover. It was never random. It was never about not caring. It was a pattern, a quiet form of self-protection that doesn't always look like protection from the outside. And once you start to see it that way, the behavior stops feeling confusing. It starts making sense. Because sometimes, the people who disappear the most are the ones who feel everything the deepest. If this explains something you've noticed in yourself, there's more to uncover. And understanding these patterns is where that begins.